What's up, everyone? Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. I'm really excited today to have another client interview for you guys. And for those of you who have seen our client interviews before, you probably noticed that for the first time ever, we're not just doing this on Zoom, and we're actually doing this in a real space in person. For those of you who don't know, I recently moved to New York a couple months ago, and used to be on the West Coast. And now that I'm here, a lot of our clients are actually here too. And so I figured it would just be a lot of fun to actually, do these in person and, have a face-to-face conversation for you guys. And so, as usual, today we have one of our clients who just recently, well, I guess it's been a few months now, but finished going through the recruiting process. His name is Min, and it's going to be a really interesting case study for you guys because Min comes from a very atypical background, I would say, for someone who was trying to break into high financial. In this case, for him, he was trying to break into equity research. And so, anyway, without further ado, Min, thank you for being here with us today and for coming out here. And if you don't mind, maybe just introduce yourself real quick for our audience and just let them know kind of what your background is and what your story is.
Yeah, well, Sam, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. Very excited to be here. So my name is Min. I actually recently graduated from a PhD program back in UCLA. So as you said, I do come from this, non-traditional finance background because I don't actually come from a finance background. I studied microbiology and immunology, which is actually more on the biological science field. So people don't really realize that you can actually do this type of a transition from a non-financial field, right?
Yeah.
But so I mean, the main reason why I kind of wanted to sort of pivot away from sort of like my scientific role
Mm.
and want to go into Wall Street finance. I mean, one reason is because like I didn't really find my work in lab setting as fulfilling anymore.
Mm.
I've always, like I started my career thinking that I'll be one of those, pre-med, right, doctor, dentist, those kind of like professions, right?
Yeah.
But I quickly realized that that job wasn't really for me.
Huh.
I didn't really like to interact with patients as much as I thought.
I see.
So like that's what, so I mean, I kind of wanted to sort of like stay away from those type of person interaction and go into research actually.
Yeah.
So I graduated my bachelor's in 2017, and then that's when I wanted to sort of go into PhD program because I wanted to like learn more about my field.
Mm.
I want to actually contribute more to the scientific discipline of what people are talking about, and like it was really fun at the time. But then as time passed and like towards the second and third year of my PhD program, I realized that like this path is something that I didn't really want to pursue long term because
Mm.
like in PhD like you're so focused in one particular expertise sectors, and there's obviously nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But for me, like I found more joy if I can actually sort of extend my sort of like scientific knowledge and actually integrate them into multiple sort of like areas
Mm.
as opposed to like focusing on one particular project.
Yeah.
And like and at least in the PhD program, like I do a lot of research and I do a lot of like lab work,
Yeah.
and oftentimes those things can get very cumbersome and can get very boring sometimes because like you're doing a lot of like repetitive tasks, and there's a point at which now if your experiment like fails like 5 times, you kind of feel like, why am I here, like what like
Yeah.
is there really a direction to this project?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and I've actually had a passion for finance for a while, actually, even before I started grad school.
Okay.
I actually recently published a book on personal finance.
Oh wow.
Yeah, back in about 2023, before I officially started to recruit for these jobs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I had the passion in mind, but I didn't really know how to integrate sort of like my long-term goal in finance to
Yeah.
what I am studying now in the biosciences field.
Yeah.
And upon doing a lot of research, I realized that this career in equity research is actually something that people go into.
Mm.
It's not a very common field actually in the West Coast,
Yeah.
because West Coast people like it's very central in biotech, and people oftentimes after you finish PhD you just go from you do all your research, you can do a postdoc, and
Yeah.
then you can go directly into translating your findings to industry.
Mm.
Um,
So
like
people usually go, because I think in our audience, you probably like most people aren't as familiar with kind of the PhD career path. My impression has always been that if you do a PhD, then you go into academia or you
mhm.
become like a professor. Do people, it sounds like also a lot of people maybe go corporate and just work for like healthcare companies and pharmaceutical
Yeah, yeah,
companies?
yeah. So I mean,
Okay.
like a couple like decades back, the norm was to go from PhD program to a postdoctoral fellow, and
Mm,
eventually pivot yourself to academia because that was a long term goal that people want to do.
yeah.
But nowadays that kind of changed.
Okay.
Like one because there actually has been a pretty big funnel on the available academic positions in these
Mm,
settings, and more people are currently doing postdocs and not really being able to actually find any
mm,
sort of academic positions.
yeah.
And to me, again, like I think it's great that we actually have these folks out there who are very bright-minded thinkers and they actually have all these crazy innovative ideas. I
Yeah.
think it's amazing. I mean, not for me, but like, but this this field in sort of like equity research is definitely something that's still not very well known today in the PhD community.
Yeah.
And like
Like not a lot of people are trying to pivot into equity
Right,
research.
right. And I think the issue here is that a lot of people believe that this equity research is a very financial sort of like niche heavy job.
Mm,
It really is, right?
mm,
I mean, in the end, like, like a successful equity researcher does actually have to know how to do modeling. They have to know actually how to actually, perform like these calculations to actually project, cash flows and all that stuff.
yeah.
But I realized that at least in the biotech space, the biggest strength that you actually can start with in this field is actually the science,
Right.
because ultimately, like if you are trying to project a cash flow model for a drug company, right? If you don't know the drug or if you don't know the
Right.
scientific background on how that drug actually works, then what client out there is going to trust you enough to say, oh, I think that this stock can go up 5% in the next
Right.
5 years because of this reason.
Right.
So it's definitely something that I slowly realized that this career can actually be fruitful for some people who might
Yeah.
not want to do long-term scientific laboratory work but actually still want to think about science.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I do appreciate about this job is even now, I recently started in Guggenheim about like 2 months ago, and I really haven't been doing a lot of actual modeling stuff yet because what they really prioritize is do you understand how the companies work and do you
Mm,
understand the science.
yeah.
But obviously, for me, I come from this background, and it's easier for me to actually like learn this background and actually get rolling with the drug companies and
Yeah.
understanding their trial design and stuff. Um,
How did you, because you mentioned you did some research and then you kind of realized that this could be a viable career path for someone with your background, but how did you, how did you figure that out? Did you were you talking to people who had already made the switch, or did you read something somewhere online
mhm.
that suggested you could do this? Like, how did you
It was
come
it,
across
it was
this?
rough, right? I mean, the closest sort of transition that I actually started was actually consulting, actually,
Mm,
because typically like the traditional norm is if you don't want to do anywhere near academia or even industry or even anything lab related, then the common pathway was either going to patent law
mm,
or consulting, at least in the West Coast,
mm,
right? Now, consulting is something that I also considered, and I did actually apply for several consulting jobs in the past. Those big three: McKinsey, Bain,
yeah,
BCG,
sure.
several other life science firms specific roles. But the only issue that I felt with consulting is that like they kind of place you into these like random sort of sectors that oftentimes that you don't really want to be part of, right? So for
Mm,
example, if BCG, let's say, they needs people to actually study consumer design, or somewhere in the utility space or chemical manufacturing, you are placed in those sort of sectors beyond your control.
mm,
And to me, I didn't actually want to totally give up my expertise and sort of my background in science. I still
yeah,
want to think about science. I still want to actually do something related to life sciences. So I didn't really want to take that risk into consulting. Plus, there's actually a lot of travel requirements for that, and
right.
that's one thing that that was not down for. So yeah, I mean, like I mean, I kind of sort of like look into other sort of pathways that are available.
Yeah.
And honestly, equity research again is something that was just really not publicly available in the West Coast, and I
Mm,
really
right.
had to do a lot of searching to figure out what is out there.
Right.
So for me, luckily, I did actually have one fellow colleague in UCLA who actually did some type of equity research type of internship
Okay.
at Goldman Sachs. So I kind of started there, and I talked to her, and she sort of like gave me some perspectives about that. This is one path that people can take,
Mm,
and and when I learned about this field, I was like, oh, okay. So like, I mean, I didn't realize that like this field actually exists for
yeah.
people like PhDs. So I did a little more searching. I started to actually look up people just on LinkedIn and saying, biotech equity research PhDs, and eventually there
Right.
actually has been, like more and more people start to appear on the feed.
Right.
So slowly, I just started to like reach out and network, and eventually I was able to talk to some amount of people out there, and they actually gave me some more clarity on how the job entails.
Yeah.
And that's when I eventually sort of, start to realize that, oh, maybe this career path can work.
Yeah.
Because the thing about like these financial jobs is, like if you look at any newsletter or if you look at any forums, like they say that you have to do internships, you have to, do all these XYZ things to actually get into those, field. And for me, obviously, at the time I was near graduation, and I was
Right.
writing my thesis and stuff, and at that time I didn't really have any, like a way to get all those before I,
Right.
joined the program. But like obviously with the PhD sort of community, it's expected that we don't have any
Right.
experiences.
Right.
So as long as we sort of like demonstrate some sort of passion towards the field and actually do some more research on
Yeah.
how to pivot this career, then it was a very interesting way to sort of get into.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I would say the thing that stands out to me from hearing this story is one, I also give you props for um, just like making that switch
Mhm.
because I feel like a lot of people grow up thinking they want to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, right? Like I originally thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and then and he spent you especially because I mean, how many years is a PhD? It's like 3 or 4 years.
Oh no, it can be up to 6 or 7 years.
6 or 7 years.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's up
so
there.
even longer than I thought, right? And so you invest all this time going down this path, and I feel like a lot of times people, sunk cost fallacy, right? Like people think, like, oh, I've already come this far. It feels like a much riskier thing to
Hmm.
suddenly, take a sharp left and say, okay, I'm gonna go do finance now or
Right,
whatever,
right.
right? Um, so I think that's like, in some way, requires some amount of courage, I guess, and so that's very cool to see you do that. Um, and then now that you're, I guess my other follow up question is like now that you're, because you mentioned like once you started looking on LinkedIn, you found more people with your background in this field. Like, are the other people that you work with on your team also coming from similar? Because I assume they also have to have a very scientific or
Hmm.
technical background to be able to do what you guys are doing, like your bosses and whoever. And then also like your, I guess they're competitors, but like your peers at other firms.
Right. Mhm.
What kind of backgrounds are you typically seeing on these biotech equity research teams? I'm sure it's like roughly ballpark like some percentage PhDs and some percentage other things. Like what are the most common paths
Mhm.
I guess you've seen for people that are interested in working in this field?
Yeah, so I mean, I will definitely say that many of the peers that I currently work with, even Guggenheim, about 80% of them do have either a PhD or PharmD.
80.
80%, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So even in my office, people next to me, are that they have held PhD for a while. Some people have already done a postdoctoral fellow even for like 5 years. So people do actually have, this long history, of doing these long academic work.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, like if those people simply just did not have a short term goal post PhD, and maybe that's when and maybe that's why they've done a postdoc for a couple of years, and then they realize that academia isn't right for them,
Mm.
and they may have sort of found this route separately. Um, yeah, and I mean going back to your original point about me, sort of like taking a sharp turn, it was definitely a big risk, right? Yeah, because like, like I started officially, the whole process last this December,
Yeah.
and like I was applying to many places, like Cantor Fitzgerald was had they having had like 5 openings back then. Jeffries had many openings, RBC Capitals. I was applying to basically almost everyone's out there, and I
Mm.
really didn't hear back from anybody.
Mm.
So like that's when I realized, oh, maybe this career path can actually be a big risk.
Mm.
So like I won't lie that I was scared, right? Like and
Of course.
yeah, like as my deadline came closer and closer, I was like, oh, I don't have a job yet, so what do I do?
Deadline
um,
as in like your graduation date, you
Correct.
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
so I defended my thesis in March, and I also officially graduated from the program in the end of March.
Yeah.
So yeah, so basically from end of March till probably like mid July, I was basically just searching for different opportunities,
Yeah.
and it was very difficult at the time.
Yeah.
So it was a very big risk, but in the end, I mean, obviously, I made it here to this far. Obviously, mostly thanks to people who supported me, including you guys. Um, but I mean, going back to the whole like equity research sort of career trajectory, it's definitely again common for people to actually have a PhD or even a master's to actually go to this field, because most of these people are looking for expertise in the field.
Yeah.
Because the idea is that it's really, really not that difficult to actually learn the basic finance skills
Right.
as a PhD or master's.
Right.
But
It's much easier than what you've had to learn in school. Obviously,
right,
it's
right,
like
yeah,
I
yeah.
think the assumption is like if you're smart enough to get through an entire PhD, you're going to be able to pick up these basic concept, finance concepts like valuation and
Mm-hmm.
how to value a business and whatnot, right? But also, I want to be clear for our audience. I think we're not saying that all equity research jobs require you to have a super
Mm-hmm.
technical
Oh yeah.
PhD type background. Is probably only certain, because equity research teams are organized by industries or verticals. Like you
Right,
cover a
right. Mm-hmm.
specific industry, and so something like biotech equity research is very technical and therefore requires this type of background. But if you're covering like I don't know consumer businesses or
Mm-hmm.
something, then obviously you probably just come from like a more traditional
Right,
business
right.
slash
Mm-hmm.
finance background,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, in fact, I do have a peer who sits next to me. He actually covers the consumer sector. So he covers, Etsy. He covers, sectors like Shopify, all
Mm,
the online retail stores. And yeah, he doesn't really have those advanced degree. He's a CFA. Not that makes much difference. But if
right.
you really want to sort of like study a very niche field, then sometimes it's nice to sort of have that advanced background.
Yeah.
And biotech is definitely a growing sector. Like in the past, like when you look at any of these like like SMID bio caps, like these stocks move like 80 to 90%, like in both directions if they simply just fail one clinical trial.
Right.
But nowadays, I actually have realized that volatility actually has been getting narrower. um,
Mm,
and I'm not sure if that's because more and more PhDs are actually coming into the program and actually providing a little more realistic valuations, as opposed to just like saying, oh, if this trial fails, then the stock can actually be can move 85% in both directions. Right.
right.
So yeah, I really haven't experienced that type of volatility so far in my current sector.
Yeah.
So which I think is a good thing for the sector, because
Right.
I think people still to this day view these biotech as just a meme stock. Right. um
Right.
yeah, but I mean, like you said, I mean, like some sectors do actually need some specialties. Like if you've covered utilities, then maybe like a PhD or master's, within this field might be useful.
Yeah.
I do have one friend who's currently is doing a PhD in mechanical engineering, and he actually is trying to look into some utility sort of like about or utility equity research programs.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Very
But I mean,
interesting.
compared to like I think banking, I do think that equity research definitely has more of that sector specific
Yeah.
requirements
Yeah,
that might be
for sure.
beneficial.
Um, so I'll pivot a little bit. So like going back to what you were saying, so like you started recruiting. Actually, when did you officially get your offer again? Because I know it's been a
Mhm.
while.
Yeah, so my official offer in Guggenheim was beginning of July, so
Okay.
right around after the Independence Day.
And you started recruiting around like December, right? So it was like a 7 month process from when you really started applying
Hmm.
to when you got your offer. And then I guess shifting over to kind of like just Wall Street Matchmaker a little bit, like what was the impetus or what made you, I don't know how you found us actually, but like what made you, first of all, like want to, join a program like ours um, and I think you joined, I want to say around like March.
I did, yeah. So
Yeah.
I actually joined right actually a couple days before my defense.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
like at that point you had already applied to a bunch of jobs on your
Hmm.
own. Sounds like I think you said earlier you weren't really hearing. Did you have any interviews or you didn't hear back from any of them or?
No. So basically, I was applying to a lot of places, and like even before I even consider equity research, I was considering other fields like venture capital, a little bit of private equity here and there, mostly scattered in the West Coast. Um, it was really until like sometime like late February, early March, when I realized that my current strategy is just not working.
Mm,
Whatever resume that I have right now is either not good enough, or maybe the structure here is missing,
mm,
and I really just needed some guidance myself on how to actually sort of like do this in a more appropriate way,
yeah.
right? Because the problem with PhD program is that they really, really don't teach you how to find jobs. Right, right. Because
Right.
I mean, because like they're, I mean, it makes sense if you think about it. Because for them, they really don't want you to find an actual job. They want you to sort of like stay in academia.
Mm,
They want you to do a postdoc. Blah blah blah, and eventually make yourself up to the professor route, right?
right.
Which is great if you really, really love the science and if you really want to actually explore the depth in the field.
Right.
But the thing is that that kind of mindset has changed for a lot of people.
Mm.
And like even in my school, like career sort of counseling, I never found any of those very useful because many of these counselors, were PhDs, in the past, and they themselves
These are
actually.
counselors for the PhD department specifically, not like the general UCLA career services, or is
uh,
it the same?
Well, it's the same. So I
Okay,
mean, the general UCLA career service is for there's for undergrad and also for grad programs.
right.
So I obviously went to the grad program, but even then, like the way how they're actually structuring resumes and the way how they're actually teaching students how to actually find like these networking opportunities was very shallow.
Right.
Like things that I can just search on YouTube on how to network, right? So I didn't really find those as valuable, and from
Right.
especially in Wall Street, like I really figured that I really need to actually join some program that can actually sort of walk me through like all this process more in detail.
Yeah.
And I looked through places like Wall Street Oasis, Wall Street Prep was the other one, and then I mean I just like weighted my different skills, and I saw most of your testimonials,
Yeah.
and then I just wanted to just take a quick, or not quick, just wanted to take a um I mean, I wouldn't even say risk, but I really would just wanted to have some support at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So it was kind of I wouldn't say a rash decision, but very it was I kind of like made a choice like probably like the maybe like a couple days after I actually first talked to one of your clients. I think his name was Juan, I think.
Hmm.
And yeah, like I was, like of course at the time, like it was a big investment.
Right.
So I was like, ooh, this is actually right for me. Yeah, but I mean, like I think eventually, like I, realized that I made all this investment, so I better make the best out of it. So I
Yeah.
went through all the modules, as if I was actually going through all the process over and over again. And honestly, it helped a lot.
Yeah.
Like
Before we go there,
yeah.
because you mentioned you checked out obviously like all the obvious candidates, right? Like WSO, Wall Street Prep. These are all like companies that have been
Hmm.
around a long time. We've been around not as long, but still 6 7 years at this point. What ultimately made you choose? Because I think we all offer something slightly different,
Hmm.
but what ultimately made you choose to go with Wall Street Mastermind as opposed to maybe some of these other options?
So to
And some of
me,
them are probably
yeah, yeah.
cheaper too.
I mean, so to me, what actually was more valuable to me was not really the resources that you guys provide, but it was really the availability of the coaches.
Mm.
Like just based on all the like testimonials that I've seen, like most people were saying that one of the best features about this program is that the coaches were actually very open minded and they were always available to answer questions.
Yeah.
And that might not be true for so many other programs.
Mm.
Like I was actually part of this another program in the past called My Consulting Offer when I was actually going through consulting
Oh
sort
no
of
way.
processes. And
I know. Yeah. Sorry.
yeah,
I know
no,
of them. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm gonna say it now that program sucks, right?
Okay.
And I don't want to say it in a bad way to sort of like call them out, but like for them, like it was really really difficult to actually be able to actually talk to mentors and actually get client and actually have opportunities to actually talk with coaches,
Mm.
right? They only gave like a 3 to 4 like slots to actually be able to go through your resumes and stuff. And to me, I feel like that was too business oriented,
Mm.
right? Because like if a program accepts you, like I think a good program should be able to sort of like take their clients one by one
Yeah.
and actually guide them along the way and actually be available
Yeah.
if they can. But many of these programs weren't like that. Like every time we actually had to like consult like with a coach, we had to either pay extra premium,
Mm.
or it was very hard to actually get answers.
You're saying
But
it's like very transactional, like
exactly,
like
yeah,
every additional hour of work or every
right,
additional
right,
hour
yeah,
of support, or if I have
exactly,
more
yeah.
questions.
Yeah,
Got it. Got
like
it.
I
Got it.
felt like like every time I actually need to talk to someone in those programs, I actually had to like pay more premium, right?
Mm.
And to me, like that wasn't really the style that I wanted.
Yeah.
And based on the testimony that I've seen, I think this program was the one that actually offered the most mentorship, right?
Gotcha.
Because like I said, right, all of these resources that teach you like these financial like skills, those can be like taught anywhere,
Right.
right? Like you can easily just go to YouTube or and learn DCF. You could learn comps,
Mm.
right? But I think what actually made this program stand out for me is really the interaction and the availability of coaches who are able to help you out along the way.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that. Because yeah, I mean, when we were thinking about how we wanted to structure the program, I mean, obviously that's like a very important decision for us as a business.
Hmm.
And I do agree that I think most programs out there that you see, they do structure it like you get this many hours or you get this many edits on your resume
Hmm.
revision, you get
Right, right.
this many mock interviews, or like
Yeah.
it's very defined in terms of like what's included and
Hmm.
exactly what you get, and then you get it for this period of time, and after
Right,
12
right.
weeks
Hmm.
then
Right,
everything
right.
expires. And then so when we first started this program, we just decided like everybody's different. Everyone's coming in with like different background, different profile, different goals. Some people are coming in freshman year, some are coming
Hmm.
in sophomore, junior, senior year. Some are coming in as PhDs. Some already graduated. Like the recruiting timeline, like
Hmm.
how long it's going to take them to get a job is all going to be different. We can't say like, oh, everyone's going to be done
Right,
with a
right. Hmm.
job in 12 weeks. And then, so also in our experience, some people just need more support, and then some people don't need as much
Right.
support, and
Hmm.
some people want to ask us questions like every single day, and then some people maybe will only check in with us like once in a
Hmm.
while. And so it's
Right,
just
right.
like
Hmm.
it was it didn't feel right to tell people like, oh, like this is how much you're gonna get, and then for us to then be able to be say like, oh, we're confident that this is gonna work for you,
Yeah.
because it may or may not, right? It just depends on like every person's different, and so we always say like there's not like a one size fits all thing, and then so that was kind of like why we made that decision. It was like we're just gonna make everything unlimited. Uh, just think of it as like all you can eat, right? Like
Yeah.
whatever you need, and
Hmm.
then um, so we don't have a cap on anything. We give people like lifetime access, meaning like we have students that come in and initially they're asking us to help them find an internship for the summer, and then sometimes like after your summer internship you might have to recruit again for full time,
Hmm.
and then sometimes even after you end up somewhere full time you might want to like lateral to a different firm, right? And
Right,
so
right.
like
Hmm.
and that was my own experience in my career where I did my summer internship at Bear Stearns in 2007, and then that was the last summer ever that
Yeah.
they existed. And then so I didn't have a firm to go back to for full time, and so I had to re-recruit. And then
Right.
after
Hmm.
I ended up at Deutsche Bank for a year, I then lateraled to Morgan Stanley for my second and third year. And so like my own experience was like, sometimes it might take like two or even three tries before you actually end up somewhere where you're like, super happy about the
Hmm.
outcome. And so just like, that's what I want people to be able to have to like, and a lot of people don't need it, right? A lot of people just get their internship,
Hmm.
converts to a full
Hmm.
time. They're super happy with it, and then okay, they don't need our help anymore. But for some people, like they do need that like help the second time and third time, whatever. And we don't want to. We don't want to just like not allow people the chance to be able to do that. And so for some people, like I mean, for you, we only had to help you. I guess for a few months before you landed something, but for some people, like we work with them for like a
Right.
couple
Hmm.
years, right? And so just like everyone's different. Um, but so anyway, that's I'm really glad to hear that that was the differentiating factor for you. Um,
Yeah, and I will say that the other part that really I think helped with this program was the do it for yourself networking thing.
hmm,
Like I really think that honestly was actually the sort of big reason how I was actually able to sort of like capture this opportunity.
yeah,
Like because like it's really hard to network, right? And it's really hard to sort of like just like sit down and just like spam emails and stuff. And like those are things that it takes a lot of courage and takes a lot of like effort, and it
yeah,
can get very exhausting. I mean,
yeah,
myself included. I mean, like I didn't really like find it a lot fulfilling to be able to sort of like just have to sort of like do that on my own. So and really like it was through that program where I was actually able to like get most of my networking done.
yeah,
And one funny story actually about Guggenheim actually.
yeah.
I'm not sure if I ever told you this. I actually interviewed with Guggenheim actually back in April, but
Mm,
then I actually did not get the next round actually.
mm,
But it was actually through these do it for you networking that they were actually able to reach back out to my original interviewer at Guggenheim.
oh,
And I think when he saw that email, like he actually like thought that like I was actually trying to reach out back and ask for other opportunities if they should persist.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, luckily, like on that mailing list was actually one of the VPs who's actually working under my director currently. And like because I kind of showed that type of mentality that I want to continue working.
yeah.
He actually gave me the opportunity to actually do a project, and I nailed it. And
Right.
eventually, and that's how kind of actually how I was able to land the role. So I mean, in hindsight, like if I did not sign up for that program and I was actually able to sort of like get through those calls,
Yeah,
I don't know if I would still be here now. Like talking to you about this program opportunity.
yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't I don't think you told me that story, but yeah,
Mm.
that's great to hear. So and for our audience, because they don't have context on what done for you networking is, it's a relatively new thing that we started doing, really just this year in 2024. Where because we realize that we're always thinking about like, hey, how can we make our program even better? Or it's just always with like the question we're always asking is like, how can we help our clients be even more successful, right? And even though like for the longest time we've always taught all of our clients like how to go out and network, and networking is one of those like it's not hard, but also like they don't really ever teach you how to do it in school.
Of course.
And usually when people have to recruit for banking or equity research or like high finance, it's like the first time that they really have to do it, and so most people just end up doing like a lot of trial and error
Hmm.
and making a lot of mistakes along the way. And obviously, it's not ideal when you do that because one, it takes a lot of time. Two, sometimes you don't even know you're making mistakes. You're just not seeing
Right.
results, but you don't know why. And so we taught people like all the best practices, and yes, they could do it themselves, but then we realized that a lot of times, even though they know how to do it, the problem was actually that like people don't have the time because networking is so
Hmm.
time consuming, right? Like the number of it's a numbers game, but like also the number of people that you have to email sometimes just to be able to get like a critical mass in terms of like the number of calls you can get on
Hmm.
is like a lot, right? Like most of our clients, they usually email at least hundreds of people. We have clients that have emailed as many as like 2 to 3 thousand, even. Like I've heard stories of like thousands of people. And so that's very time consuming. Like finding these people's contact information, sending out the actual
Hmm.
emails. Most of the time, they're not going to respond on your first email. Then you got to follow up a second time. Then you got to follow up a third time. And so it's just like it's a very time consuming, but also mind numbing process. And once you learn how to do it and you've done it a few times,
Hmm.
you're not really learning anything new by doing it like,
Right.
the 300th time. Like, and so like, we were just like thinking about it, we're like, you know what? Like, part of the reason, like, even though people know they should network, like, it's just, they have so many other things going on. And I'm sure you did too, right? You had your dissertation and this and that. But like, usually, even for, our more average client, it might be like a college student who's still an undergrad and they're trying to like keep their grades high. They're trying to do internships at the same time.
Hmm.
They're trying to send all these networking emails, have networking calls. They're in student organization. They have like finance club on campus. They're trying to
Hmm.
prep for their interviews, behavioral, technical. It's like
Of course, yeah.
you're juggling like 7 or 8 things, which is like what's required of you to be successful in recruiting. But they just something has to go on the back burner, and a lot of times it just ended up being networking
Yeah.
because when you're so busy and you have all these things you need to do, usually the things that get put on the back burner are like the things that you dread the most. And I've never met a person who like enjoys like sending networking emails. Some people might enjoy like talking to people, like something like if you're like really extroverted or whatever, like you might enjoy the conversation with the bankers, but the process for like getting people to
Hmm.
agree to talk to you, that part like no one
Oh
likes,
yeah.
right? And so that's how like we were like, okay, let's create a way for us to just like take that off people's plate and do it for them. And so like we'll do all the groundwork of like getting like reaching out to finding contacts, reaching out to bankers, getting them to respond, and then basically if they agree to talk to you, then obviously you take over at that point. You're the one who has to just still show it to
Of
the
course,
client,
of
have the
course. Hmm.
conversation.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just context for our client. But no, that's crazy though. I didn't know that that's how you got like a second chance at Guggenheim. So that's
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's super cool.
Yeah, and again, right? I mean, like, I really want to like emphasize the importance of networking, right? Because it's something that I think most of us are not really told that it's a really important part. Because like most high school counselors tell us that, oh, in college, just do well in your school, get good grades, right, and then just make a good resume, apply to jobs, and hope for the best, right?
Yeah,
That's a normal sort of like a traditional way of how people find jobs.
yeah,
But nowadays it's different. Like even in a non-finance related role, if you don't know actually how to properly actually reach out to people out there and actually expand your baseline, it's really really hard nowadays.
yeah,
There's and that's why you hear people out there who don't really have very good GPAs, and they still can actually get to like these opportunities because they're actually very good at actually reaching out and
yeah,
expanding their base.
yeah,
And I really want to emphasize the importance of that.
yeah,
Even like especially in PhDs, because a lot of people with PhDs, they don't really think that networking is important because they believe that their degree is sufficient, right?
right.
Because I mean, like with PhD, like there's really no other external higher level post PhDs unless you do like either MD or other specialized program afterwards.
Yeah,
But I think the issue with PhD is that people don't really realize that their PhD is not everything. And
Mm.
for me, like that was a big realization that maybe like I should actually like, take it a little bit more seriously and actually not rely too much on one particular piece of paper.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, of course, in hindsight, maybe after I graduated, now that I actually have a degree, and now that I actually have more concrete evidence that I actually have to show, I'm sure that helped a lot too.
Yeah.
But in the end, networking was definitely a huge part of how I actually was actually able to make this far.
For sure.
Even like so I also applied for for Bank of America.
Mm.
And part of the reason why I was actually even able to get any interview from Bank of America is because I randomly just messaged somebody on LinkedIn, and he happened to respond at the right time, and
Yeah.
he actually referred me to the VP who's actually recruiting
Yeah.
for a person. So if I didn't do that, I'm pretty sure that that opportunity would have been lost.
So how many? Because I remember you actually interviewed with multiple firms,
Hmm.
right? Like at least after we got to know you, after you joined the program, I remember talking about multiple processes. How
Right.
many firms did you kind of interview with? I guess in the 3 or 4 months that we worked together.
Yeah, so I think official for like first and second round, because most first round interviews are just screening processes with HR. So like if I include like official like second round interviews, it was the first one was with RBC Capital, and then with Jefferies, and then Guggenheim, and then came Bank of America. Stifel was the other one that I didn't really get that far of that, but that was one.
Hmm.
Lifeside Capital was one firm that was trying to recruit, but I think they were actually like trying to find somebody in the next winter cycle, so it was a
Hmm.
little too far away.
Yeah.
And then TD Common was the other one,
Okay.
and then Oppenheimer. So
Okay.
those firms actually, so was the one that I was able to make second round. And then after second round, the most firms actually ask you to do some project or
Right.
some type of a technical assessment. So with that, I was able to go through that with Jeffries, Bank of America, Guggenheim, and Oppenheimer.
Okay.
Those four.
So you got like I think I counted like 8 firms. So you went from like having trouble getting interviews before to then
Hmm.
getting all these opportunities. 8 is a lot compared to most people, I feel like. And then you made it to, I guess, the assessment, which technically that's considered the last step in these processes.
So I mean, it depends on I think the firms too. Like some firms just give you the assessment right away, and then they sort of screen people out based on the performances. Because like at least with equity research, and I'm sure it's probably the same with banking,
Yeah.
there's two types of assessments. There's actually like a long term, like a 1 week project assessment, versus like a short term assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, long term is more like that. Like they give you a prompt, and then they ask you to do all this research, and actually ask you to do maybe one final valuation on what you think that this particular clinical trial design can actually
Yeah.
move the stock up or down, those kind of
Yeah.
things. And then the more short-term project will be more like, if a company suddenly releases a press release, right? Are you actually able to quickly be able to actually respond to this and actually do this in a timely manner?
Got
Which is
it.
very common, especially during earnings. Right?
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
companies release like a random, like
So
a
they
six
just ask
k.
you to like write, almost like write like a quarterly earnings report as if you were already on the team. Like, how would you do it basically?
Oh, kind of, right? I mean,
Yeah.
of course, like they're not expecting you to obviously know anything about the company,
Yeah.
but they'll usually give you some type of a prompt or some background
Yeah.
on the company sort of platform, and they ask you to just read the science and read about the the current team, read
Yeah.
about the current valuation, and they ask like if let's say this phase 2 trial actually worked out really well, and then that actually has moved to a phase 3 trial, right? 'Cause that's really big, right? Like going from a phase 2 to a phase 3 trial is a big sort of transition.
Yeah.
How would that actually change the valuation of a company?
Yeah.
So like and obviously all that requires you to know the science and know the background,
Right.
and stuff. And I mean, it's very different based on the firm. Like for Jefferies, it was different. Jefferies,
Mm.
there was no valuation at all, but it was mostly just researching on like about the whole the drug, understand the current competitor market. That was like a really long project. I
Yeah.
remember doing that.
So I was gonna actually ask. It sounds like every firm's different, but typically, like for students who are, let's say, just trying to go into banking, for their interview prep, they're just prepping two things: it's
Hmm.
behavioral interview questions, technical interview questions. For you, obviously, there's a third added element of, the science
Hmm.
part of it. What would you say was kind of like the mix in your experience when it comes to like the interview types of interview questions that you were being asked,
Hmm.
including these assessments that you had to do? Is it
Right, right.
like a third, a third, a third, or is it like
Mhm.
heavily science based and very little, valuation, finance type technicals? Like, how do you kind of think about that?
I'm gonna say like on average, it was mostly 80% behavior and 20% technicals and the project.
Okay.
So like behavior was a big thing, right? Because
Mm,
obviously, it's not common for people to go from science to Wall Street. So I think most firms really want to, check up to see like why do you really want to work in finance?
right.
And that was a really difficult part for me. I mean, I thought I had this question down at the time, but when I, actually talked to people, like in Wall Street Mastermind and different coaches, I realized that, oh, maybe it's not the the proper way to answer. So like all those inputs and all those like types of like behavior
Yeah.
modules definitely helped a lot for sure.
Yeah.
So like like basic questions. I mean, even this like these simple questions on like why equity research,
Sure.
right? Those are it's really like almost like redoing your personal statement all over again, right? Because like it's a really easy question to ask but very hard to answer.
Yeah.
So
What was the biggest change? Like even just taking that, I'm sure the question is like, why do you want to go
Mhm.
from PhD to ER, right? Um, what would you say was the biggest change in how you approached that after kind of talking to the coaches and things like that? Like, what were you saying before, and then like what what was the angle after? I
I
guess.
mean, in the like previously, like I just give them a very like a like traditional answer, right? Like I mean not directly, right? But more like, oh, I didn't really want to do science anymore, right? I think it's time for me to move on, and go away from this bench work and actually towards something a little bit more interesting.
Mm,
Like to me, like I mean, in hindsight, like those are very like very common type of answers that people anybody can answer. But I think after I sort of like went through more modules and actually learned about how like how different people actually think about Wall Street. So I mean, one perfect example is actually integrating like my conversation that I actually had with people working there, and actually saying based on my experience with who I talked to in this firm, I realized that X Y Z blah blah blah,
yeah.
right? So that definitely helped a lot for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
That's actually like very interesting to hear that it was 80% behavioral because we always tell our students again, people that are just interviewing for maybe more investment banking roles. So there's
mhm.
not like the science aspect, but even between behavioral and technical, it's like everyone's always spending all their time prepping
Mhm.
technicals,
Yeah.
because I think technicals are more intimidating for most people. They feel like if I show up to an interview and I don't know if I get asked a technical question and I don't know how to answer, it's very obvious, and then
Mhm.
it looks very bad, and
Yeah.
and so they're like they're very afraid of that happening. Whereas the behavioral side, I feel like people have this they have the wrong idea where they think like, well, if I get asked a behavioral question that I didn't think of or
Mhm.
wasn't like didn't prepare for, I can just kind of like make some stuff
Right,
up and BS my
right.
way through it.
Yeah.
Uh, in reality, like our experience after working with over 1,500 people at this point is that the behavioral part is way more important. Like we have
Mhm.
students that go to these interviews and they come back and they say, "Oh, like that was like I had like one of my best interviews ever. It was like all behavioral, but then my next interview was a technical one, and I actually messed up on this accounting question
Mhm.
pretty badly, and so they were like very nervous. And then the next day, they got the offer. And the guy
Right.
I'm thinking
Mhm.
about in my mind is James, who ended up at J.P. Morgan. But like he's not the only example, right? But my point is like when your interviewer likes you because you have good stories and they like who you are as a person,
Mhm.
they're willing to overlook like
Yeah.
the technical stuff because they can teach you that stuff.
Right. Right. Mhm.
If they don't like you and you're a technical whiz, and you get every single question correct,
Mhm.
they just they still don't want to work with you, right? So like it doesn't really
Right.
matter. And so that's just like I think what most people don't understand. And I think also the other challenge for why I think people don't spend so much time on behaviorals is because it's hard to improve your behaviorals on your own. Like when you're studying technicals, you can feel like you're
Right. Right.
making real
Yeah. Mhm.
progress. If you're just like trying to prep your behaviorals, you're just like, okay, I look up the most common questions and then like, oh, why equity research? Okay, let me, come up with the best answer I can. And then once you've done that, that's like pretty close to your final draft, right?
Mhm.
Like if I then ask you like, okay, how do you think you can make this better? You're probably not going to come up with that many
Right.
improvements you
Right.
can make because
Mhm.
if you could, then that wouldn't have been your answer,
Right.
right? And so like I think for people they feel like, well, I've done all I can. There's not much more to do,
Mhm.
but in reality, like the trap there is like, yeah, you can't be the one to uh, come up with all the improvements yourself. You
Mhm.
need to have like unbiased, experienced third party,
Right.
ideally
Right.
someone
Mhm.
who's interview lots of people for the role that you're trying to apply for, and can actually like benchmark your stories and your answers against what they've heard everyone else say, because ultimately you're basically being graded on a curve, right? At
Right.
least on the behavioral
Hmm.
side. And most people don't have the, they know what they want to say, but they don't know what everyone else is saying. And so like it's hard for, like how can you know if your answer is actually good or not if you don't know how you
Right.
stack up
Right.
against
Hmm.
other people, right? And so
Yeah.
anyway, this just reaffirms what I already knew, but I think maybe our audience doesn't really think about, which is you got to spend more time, invest more time into your
Of
behaviorals, and
course. Mhm.
figure out a way to just get better on that side, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't
Hmm.
do technicals, but like the weighting needs to be, I think, it needs to reflect like how important each part actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, again, for me, like, I was very nervous about technicals. I mean, at first when I first joined the program, I thought, like, if as long as I could get the technicals down, I should be fine. But
Mm,
then when I actually start to like interview for like these RBC, starting with RBC,
yeah.
didn't realize how less technical they actually care about, your background.
Yeah.
So that's when I really started to actually do a lot more practice with behavior. So I have my Coach Johnny. He helped me a lot with my prompt.
Yeah.
But also the other thing that I think that actually gave me a strength in most of my processes, and I'm telling this because most of the interviewers actually told me this directly, is the enthusiasm. And maybe it's hard to sort of like depict that to to your interviewers,
Yeah.
but so far, like, I mean, people actually has told me that my enthusiasm actually to actually join the program actually has been pretty high, and they were actually pretty impressed
Mm,
about my commitment, and sort of like my actual honest sort of like a way to go away from this traditional benchmark science to Wall Street.
yeah.
Again, and there's no way to really formulate that, right? Because
Right.
you really have to sort of like know to yourself. And I think I did a pretty decent job actually showing that passion
Yeah.
to my interviewers, and I think that was one reason why I was actually able to get this.
Yeah, and that's really
Yeah.
important, and that's all in your behavioral side. Is like being able
Hmm.
to convey that and get that across to your interviewer in a genuine way. People can, I mean, people just like people that are authentic, I
Yeah.
think, right? And so that's great that you were able to do that. I guess I know we're coming up on time, so like, but I think a really important question that I always like to ask is
Mhm.
now that you are kind of on the other side and you've gotten the offer successfully, what's like the best piece of advice you have for people who maybe are still going through recruiting or about to, or even just they're kind of where you were, whatever, 6 8 10 months ago. Maybe it's something you learned along the way as you were going through it, or uh, I don't know, just something that you wish someone had told you way earlier that
Mhm.
would have made a big difference for you. Is there anything like that that you want to kind of just share with our audience?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I obviously cannot say or speak this behalf for the banking because obviously the recruiting is different. And with equity research, like, it was nice that there were actually different lateral recruitment sort of programs that will scatter throughout the year.
Mm,
But I think a biggest piece of advice that I encourage is, I mean, this might sound so simple, right? But just don't get discouraged because, like, I mean, I know that's really easy, being said and done because some people might be recruiting for many years. Like, I was fortunately able to actually get through this within a reasonable time frame,
yeah,
given this current also job market too.
yeah,
But I think like, just don't really like, it's a very hard process, right? Like,
yeah,
obviously, like, there's like, if you just keep on applying and nothing actually gets your way, it could get very frustrating. And I've been there before. Like, in fact, I mean, at least with Jeffries, I actually went through like 6 different interview cycles, and
wow,
eventually they didn't take me.
right,
So I mean, it was hard really to not get depressed.
yeah,
Like, at the time, my girlfriend was actually like in the military, so I didn't really have people to talk to
mm,
actually sort of relieve the stress. But in the end, I mean, I really appreciated like my coaches who were always there for me. Like, whenever I actually asked a question, like, I was able to get a response within like 24 hours
yeah,
about like different sort of ways to get there.
yeah,
But in the end, like, I think for me, like, it was just the motivation and just the fact that I just didn't really quit. And
yeah,
again, I mean, that's a very easy statement said being done, but it's a really important, I think, foundation, or like, yeah, the behavior that we really have to sort of always integrate to these processes.
yeah,
I mean, hopefully, like, in the future, like, maybe when the market gets better, it might be a little bit, like, hopefully there's more opportunities,
yeah,
but just altogether, like, I mean, everybody is there with you. Like, people want you to get a job.
yeah,
So it's very easy to like fall into the trap of like the imposter syndrome. But in the end, like I mean, anybody can really do things well if they really just show the passion for it.
You know, it's funny. I have to say, I'm sure there were because this is normal for everyone, right? Like, um, you know, after coaching 1,500 plus people, are there people that just go through the process and then they get like, you know, every single interview that they applied for and
Hmm.
pass every single interview, get every single offer? It's like, yes, that has happened. But I can tell you that's like, you know, those are like the unicorns. They're like not this not
Right. Yeah.
normal, right?
Hmm.
There's like the zero probably 0.01% of people that do that, and for everybody else, before they get their first offer, they go through some amount of rejection because the process is just that hard. Uh, some people go through a lot, some people go through
Hmm.
less. Um, but one thing I will say about you is like, you know, and at some point, like, you know, you have doubt. You start thinking like, maybe I can't do this, whatever. But with you, I always felt like you were just like very positive. At least when I was like, you know,
Hmm.
talking to you online, like, and
Interesting.
it never showed that you were. At least I didn't feel like, oh, like Min's like super, you know, depressed or
Yeah.
you know stressed out or whatever. Like you were always like just, I don't know. I always got like very positive energy from you, which I really enjoyed because like obviously you know as a coach like sometimes we also deal with people that are like very negative,
Right.
right?
Of
And
course.
and we can feel the energy. But regardless, I think that's you know just a testament to I think your character. But the other thing I think you bring up a really good point, which is the piece of advice you gave is like sounds so simple, right? It's like just you know don't get down and don't give up. But I think like the actual to your point, the actual execution of that
Hmm.
is the hard part
Of course.
because
Yeah.
when we can sit here and talk about it after the fact and it sounds easy, but
Yeah.
when you're actually going through it, it's hard to not like nobody likes rejection and nobody
Hmm.
and every time another rejection comes in, especially when you feel like you've been doing the work, you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, at least you think you are,
Right. Right.
and it's
Hmm.
still not working out, it's easy to get discouraged, right? And also I think for a lot of people that are trying to go into this field, in my experience, they're like, you know, maybe they've been like really good students most of their life. Always gone to good schools. They've
Yeah.
always, for the most part, like, you know, succeeded in whatever they pursued. And this is like the first time where you are just experiencing like setback or what feels like a setback after setback after setback. And just like, so a lot of people, for a lot of people, that's like tough to handle. Right. And I
Right.
think,
Right.
um, in my experience, like how strong you are mentally and how much you're able to how resilient you are and how much you're able to like kind of persevere through the process a lot of times is actually what differentiates like the people who ultimately end up getting the offers versus the people who
Hmm.
don't. It's not like because oh the person that got the offer is smarter than the person that
Yeah. Yeah.
didn't.
Hmm.
I myself like I mean I mentioned earlier you know when Bear Stearns was like kind of basically starting to you know go under, like I didn't have a return offer
Right.
after my
Right.
summer
Hmm.
internship and so I had to re-recruit. That was very hard to do when you don't have a return offer because it's like a scarlet letter,
Of
right? They're
course.
like,
Yeah.
is
Hmm.
something wrong with you? Or you're a bad intern, right? And then
Right.
if your own firm didn't want to hire you back, then a lot of firms don't want to touch you with a 10-foot pole, right? But, um, and then so when I recruited for full time, I was just like, I got every single interview I applied for because I had Bear Stearns on my resume. But
Right.
I
Right.
was
Hmm.
like, every firm would always ask like, "Did you get a return offer?" And then like, I didn't want to lie, and so I said, "No,
Yeah.
I didn't."
Hmm.
But of course, like you know what's been going on in the news, right? Like everyone reads the Wall Street Journal. Everyone knew what was going on with Bear Stearns, and so I thought people would understand. But still, like they have so many options. They have so many candidates they can go with.
Hmm.
They don't have to take that risk,
Yeah.
right? And so like I think I still remember. I mean, this was you know back in 07, 08 was when I was recruiting, and you know it wasn't the best market, and I got rejected I think by like 20 plus firms
Wow.
before I think I got my last two interviews, which was like Deutsche and Jeffries. I still remember like I had my Deutsche and Jeffries interviews left,
Oh
and I was
wow.
like, these
Okay.
are the last two interviews that I have, and I was like, if I don't get these, then I guess I don't know what I'm gonna do after,
Hmm.
um, and then those are the two offers that I got,
Yeah. Yeah.
and those super days were back to back on the same day. And you know, their offices in San Francisco are actually on the same street as like California Street. So I
Oh.
remember like going to my Deutsche interview in the morning and
Oh, on
doing
the
all
same
the
day
back to back
too. That's
interviews
neat.
and like running down California Street to go to my Jeffries interviews in the afternoon and doing back. And it was like an entire day of interviews. And I was like so exhausted. But then those two ended up being, I don't know what it is. Maybe it was
Mm-hmm.
just like back against the wall and I just happened to perform that day, or maybe I just, after going through so many interviews and I had so many reps that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you do like, even through all the rejections, you do get better.
Yeah.
Um,
No, of course, absolutely.
just
Yeah.
like anything else you do, like you go to the gym multiple times in the beginning, you can barely lift anything and then you get stronger and stronger, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, anyway, but my point is, I digress. My point is, I think a lot of people like they would have never lasted until the 21st or 22nd
Yeah. Yeah.
firm because
Right. Right.
after
Mm-hmm.
the fifth one, they're like, I'm going to give up. Or if not, then after the eighth rejection, or if not, then after the 12th rejection, like
Mm-hmm.
that voice in your head just gets louder and
Of course.
louder.
Yeah.
And so, like, the people that, like me, who are just, stubborn AF and just won't quit, like, I just, like, I feel like I just outlasted a lot of the other people. It wasn't because I was like, because I wasn't even, ironically, I coach students on how to interview now, but like back then, if I'm being completely honest, like I wasn't good at interviewing, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
probably also part of the reason why it took me so long to get
Right.
a
Right.
freaking offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, so I think it's great advice. Like it really resonates with my own experience as well. And I think that's just like for anything you do in life is like, uh, I think like anything that's worth doing is usually going to be hard,
Yeah, and
right?
yeah, I mean, and for the last sort of like couple minutes or so, I will say, one another really positive thing that I actually got from networking is not necessarily about like just getting actually like my name out there and actually being able to sort of like tell them that oh, I'm currently recruiting, so please refer me to like your advisor for that. But every networking actually was a new sort of like a motivating sort of factor for me,
Mm,
right? Because obviously, if you network, people out there don't really want to say, "I don't want you," right? I mean, people are taking your calls for a reason. Whether that actually is a VP or it's a fresh person who actually just joined the team. To me, like that actually really helped me move forward because if I really didn't have those networking calls that to actually remind me that I actually want to do this, I don't know if I would have lasted this long. And like even after Guggenheim, I had several other backup plans.
mm,
I mean, I had a stifle interview coming up. I had a HC and right interview coming up. So like, and all those reasons why I was actually able to do so is because of the like I was actually able to like actually just get myself aligned and really just plan ahead. And
yeah,
what, like you said, once you are committed and once you actually are stubborn, it's really hard to just turn back, right? I mean, especially for me, I already committed this far, and I just could not imagine myself doing something else after
yeah.
coming this far. So I really just had to go all out and really go for it. But I mean, of course, like I mean, now I don't know how I'll be feeling now if I was still going through this process. But in the end, I mean, like it's a very hard process. It's very difficult, but it's not impossible.
Yeah.
So I do encourage everybody, to always, not give up, and in the end, there will be opportunities, if you really, really put your work into it.
Yeah, that's awesome,
Yeah.
man. Well, this has been an amazing interview, so I really appreciate it. And for those of you in our audience, if you are currently, thinking about, breaking into finance, whether it's like banking or equity research or sales and trading or anything that's kind of considered a high finance job, maybe going straight to the buy side. Maybe you're making a pretty big pivot from what you're currently doing, like Min did, or maybe you're even more of a traditional candidate. As we discussed, it's extremely competitive, right? And so if you are looking for just a bit of extra help to kind of like guide you through the process, um, because we've done this over 1,500 times, it's like there's a proven playbook for how to do each of these things, right? Whether it's like, what you need on your resume, to how to network the right way, to like what to say in these interviews, what are they looking for? Like these are all things that you can get coached on, and you can actually, uh, you know, outperform how you would have performed if you didn't have the coaching, right? And so just like anything else you're doing, like I think I always make the analogy that trying to working on Wall Street is like you're trying to make it to the big leagues of finance. It's like, so athletes that are trying to go pro, like they work with coaches, right? Because it's just that competitive at the top, right? And so anyway, if you're looking for that kind of help, feel free to reach out to our team. You can. It is by application only because we can't. We don't have the bandwidth to work with everyone, and also like we don't really want to work with people that we don't feel like we can actually help. And so if you want to apply, you can go to our website, www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street is abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And then, our team will hop on with you. We'll talk with you. learn more about your situation, your background. Like I said, it's not a one size fits all process, and so if we think we can help you, we'll lay out kind of what like your specific game plan needs to be and what that will look like. And then you can decide if you think that makes sense and if the game plan sounds like something that would be beneficial for you, or if not, and you want to just get some advice from us and then run with it on your own, you can also absolutely do that as well. So anyway, that's my invitation to you guys. With that said, man, I want to thank you again for
Appreciate it.
taking so much time out of your day to come here and just share your story with us. I think it's very inspirational for other people who are trying to kind of pursue the same path as you. And yeah, I'm just really excited to see what you accomplish at Guggenheim in the coming years, and or wherever else this kind of finance career path takes you.
Mhm.
And yeah, just thank you again for stopping by.
Yeah, I mean, my pleasure, right? I mean, hopefully your team grows even bigger than now. And again, I know a lot of people like have all these questions about whether a program like this would actually be beneficial, but it really was. I mean, I definitely had my doubts at first too, but I mean, I think in the end, having great mentors out there that can actually sort of like guide you was a very big factor for me. So yeah,
Absolutely.
of
I appreciate that. All right.
course.
Well, that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you for tuning in.